When the guns in Europe fell silent in May 1945, a formidable power still lurked beneath the waves. Dozens of German U-boats. Their war didn't end in combat, but with a radio order from a defeated Germany. What followed was an unprecedented operation to neutralize an entire fleet. The capture, study, and methodical destruction of hundreds of the most advanced submarines of their time. On May 8, 1945, Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, Hitler's successor, issued his final command. All U-boats were to cease hostile actions, surface, raise a black flag of surrender, and proceed to Allied designated ports. This order overrode the previous directive, codenamed Regenbogen, Rainbow, which instructed crews to scuttle their vessels to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. Despite this, over 200 captains ignored the new command and sent their submarines to the bottom in a final act of defiance. But more than 150 boats complied. From the depths of the Atlantic, from the coast of Norway to the Caribbean Sea, the steel machines surfaced one by one. Their journey led them to Allied bases, chief among them the Scottish harbour of Loch Arabal, as well as Lissahalli in Northern Ireland and Portland in England. It was here that the first wave of surrendered U-boats arrived, met by British escort ships. The procedure was meticulously planned. Boarding parties came aboard, disarmed the torpedo tubes, and confiscated Enigma cipher machines and navigation charts. The submarines, many bearing the scars of long patrols and covered in rust, were lined up in long, silent rows. In accordance with the Potsdam Conference decisions, the Allies faced a complex dilemma: what to do with this technological prize? The newest Type 21 submarines, the electroboot or electric boats, were an engineering marvel, capable of staying submerged for long periods and reaching speeds that outpaced anti-submarine warships. Everyone understood that the blueprints for these machines would become the foundation for the fleets of the future. At the same time, maintaining hundreds of captured crews and keeping the boats afloat demanded enormous resources. German submariners were transformed from military adversaries into prisoners of war. And with the harbors overflowing, a decision was made. The majority of Dönitz's fleet had to disappear forever into the depths of the sea. By the autumn of 1945, over 100 German submarines had gathered in British waters. They were a technical and logistical nightmare, rusting, requiring constant maintenance, and occupying valuable harbor space. Under these circumstances, Operation Deadlight was born, a cold-blooded plan to tow and scuttle the bulk of the Third Reich's U-boat fleet. From November 1945 to February 1946, the Royal Navy methodically carried out this sentence. The task was monumental. Of the 156 surrendered boats, 116 were condemned to destruction. They were to be towed to a deep-water area in the Atlantic known as the Northwestern Approaches and sunk. Destroyers, frigates, and even aircraft served as the executioners. The methods of destruction varied, detonating pre-placed scuttling charges, shelling them with naval guns, or simply opening their sea valves. However, the Atlantic winter had its own plans. Many U-boats were in a deplorable state after months at sea, and acts of sabotage by their own crews. Towing these unstable hulks in stormy weather was a perilous task. In the end, 56 submarines never reached the designated scuttling zones. They were swallowed by the sea en route as tow lines snapped, or their hulls failed under the pounding of the waves. For those that made it, a swift end awaited. Among those scuttled was U-2336, which went down in history as the last U-boat to sink Allied ships in European waters, an act that occurred on May 7, 1945. After the general order to cease fire had been given. On February 7, 1946, with the sinking of the final submarine, U-3514, Operation Deadlight was officially concluded. For decades, these underwater graveyards were forgotten, creating a unique underwater monument, a grim echo of the greatest naval battle in history. While most U-boats were sent to the seabed, the most valuable examples became subjects of intense study. What began as a joint effort to eliminate an enemy arsenal quickly turned into the first technological race of the Cold War. A tripartite commission allocated the surviving advanced submarines among the former Allies. The United States received 2 Type 21 boats, U-2513 and U-3008. They were commissioned into the U.S. Navy and subjected to exhaustive trials. American engineers were astonished by their underwater speed and silence. These 2 submarines directly influenced the American Guppy program, which radically upgraded the performance of hundreds of U.S. submarines, bringing them closer to the standards set by German engineers. The Soviet Union also received its share of the technology. 4 Type 21 boats were recovered from the shipyards in Danzig and handed over to the USSR. Soviet specialists meticulously studied their design, especially the modular construction methods that allowed the Type 21 to be built with incredible speed. This knowledge became the basis for the Soviet project 613, known by its NATO reporting name, the Whiskey class. Thus, the technology created to choke the Atlantic convoys became the foundation for one of the most numerous classes of Soviet submarines. Other nations also received their spoils. France used several boats, including the famous U-123, to rebuild its submarine force. Spain had interned U-573 back in 1942, and after the war, purchased it and commissioned it into its navy as the G7. This boat served until 1970, becoming one of the longest-serving U-boats in history. The technologies of the electric boats, their batteries, hydrodynamics, and air regeneration systems, became the gold standard for all non-nuclear submarines of the 1950s. For every submarine preserved in a museum, there are dozens that lie on the ocean floor. But it is these few survivors that have become the silent witnesses of a bygone era. The most famous of these is U-995. After surrendering in Norway, it served briefly in the Norwegian Navy before being returned to Germany. Today, it stands on the beach at Labo as part of the German Naval Memorial. It is a stark reminder of the 30,000 out of 40,000 German submariners who never returned from their patrols, the highest casualty rate of any branch of the German armed forces in World War II. In Chicago, thousands of miles from the Atlantic, rests U-505. Its story is unique. It was captured in combat by a U.S. task group in 1944. This operation yielded intact Enigma machines and codebooks, a massive intelligence boon for the Allies. Today, it is the centerpiece exhibit at the Museum of Science and Industry. Another unusual fate befell U-534, which was raised from the seabed in 1993. Legends still swirl around the strange circumstances of its sinking after the German surrender. Instead of being restored, its hull was carefully cut into several sections. Now, visitors in England can literally look inside the submarine, seeing its complex and claustrophobic interior. The vast majority of the boats, however, remained on the seabed. The wrecks from Operation Deadlight off the coast of Ireland have formed an unintentional marine sanctuary. They, along with the museum exhibits, serve as a dual monument. One is polished and accessible, the other hidden in the cold darkness. Both tell the final story of a steel armada that now rests forever in the deep, between history and eternity. Thanks for watching. Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more from the Warfighter Archives.